so, the story begins deep within the overgrown depths of the tundra, as it was there that the villagers had set up turkey farms, as they were preparing to gather up all the turkeys that they could possibly need for their upcoming festive feasts. And all was going well, as the villager farmers were able to grow their turkey population from just a mere few to an impressive 1,000. And they were hoping to continue this exponential growth, allowing them to feed tens of thousands of villagers, when one day everything would change, as it was on one seemingly normal morning while the villager farmers were just tending to their livestock that they saw it. It was a storm, and it was flying directly towards them. However, they weren't too worried, as they just assumed they would pass by and all would be good. But that's not what happened, as over the next few hours, that storm got closer and closer and closer, and soon they realized that this was no normal storm. No, as it was a blizzard. And well, by the time that the blizzard had struck them, it was too late, as there was no escape for any of them, as the snow had blocked off all of their paths, and so, for that reason, they were forced to hide out in their homes. But as they failed to equip their homes with adequate heating, they all froze to death. Now, back on their farms, the turkeys were attempting to resist that blizzard, as they were all starting to huddle together, attempting to spread heat amongst themselves. And it was working, as they were all staying alive and warm. But it wouldn't be like that for too long, as after a few hours, some of the turkeys on the edge of that horde began to freeze to death. And well, once the first few began to die, it didn't take too much longer for many others to fall as well, because the depopulation effect of their flock was compounding, as the loss of one would cool all the others down, and that cooling would kill a few more, and when they died, the flock would be cooled even more, resulting in the death of even more innocent lives. And so, that cycle of death, cooling, and more death was repeated over and over and over, growing in speed. And so, it just took a few hours before all of the turkeys were dead. Or so it seemed, as there was one young turkey chick that was resisting the warm grasp of death, as that chick was hiding under the stone flooring of that farm, insulating himself through the feathers of those dead turkeys. And luckily, as he was so small and there were just so many feathers, he was able to survive long enough to withstand the might of that blizzard. But once that storm was over, and he no longer had to worry about freezing to death, he encountered another problem, as he was trapped there in that pen, and there was no food nor water within it. And so, if he didn't get out of it very soon, he was going to die. And so, for that reason, over the next few days, that young turkey chick attempted to let out the loudest gobbles that he possibly could to try and get the attention of any villager so that they could save him. However, no villager was coming for him, and so he was doomed. Until, just at the final hour, when he was about to starve to death, someone heard his desperate cries for help. Now, it wasn't a villager, nor was it any other being that the young turkey had ever met before. No, as it was a witch that had heard his cries for help, and she was the one to rescue him, as she broke into that pen and began to feed that young, injured turkey hundreds of delicious seeds. This was it. He was going to survive now, as he once again felt energized and warm and regenerated. But after eating all of those seeds, he realized that the witch was gesturing for him to follow her. And well, seeing as she just saved his life, he decided, why not, and began to follow her. And thus, it was over the next few days that he was led by that witch across the snowy plains and the vast oceans and the subscribe button forests and the swamps, all until they eventually arrived at the witch's hut. At which point, the young chick was lured onto a podium and was locked up into a cage. Oh no, maybe that witch wasn't so nice, as he just did not want to be back there in a cage. And so, maybe this was all an illusion by the witch just to save him and then use him. And well, to an extent, that was what the witch was planning to do, as she then began to throw all these strange mystical potions at him. And so, with that, he began to feel very dizzy, and his world began to shake. This was wrong, all wrong. But then, that witch got out a sword, and she struck him. Instantly, pain shot across his entire body, and then his world went dark, as he had just died. But then, just a few seconds later, he was somehow brought back to life. But when that happened, he felt just a bit stronger and just a bit more resistant to attacks. Okay, maybe she wasn't so evil. However, before he could finish that thought, that evil witch struck him again. And so, once again, pain shot across his entire body as his world went dark, as he had just died. But yet again, just a few seconds later, he was revived, and just like last time, he felt just a bit stronger and just a bit more resistant. And well, that repeated over and over and over, thousands of times, if not tens of thousands of times, over the next few hours, as that witch attempted to kill that innocent young chick in hundreds of different methods, from burning to dripstone to poison. Now, this all seemed rather barbaric and brutal to force such a young and innocent being to endure all of that. But really, that witch just didn't care, as she knew that this chick was special. And so, she was determined to make the most of it and force him into his peak potential. And well, after a few hours, he had gone through a number of changes, allowing him to achieve a level of power unlike any other being on the surface of the world at that time, as he had gained a lot of strength over that time, so much in fact that just one bite from his strong beak would kill any entity, and his wings had grown to be far more resistant, and so for that reason he could now fly. Also, his mind was so strong now that he had the power to create things with just his mind. Also, he had grown to be almost 4 times the size of a regular turkey. But that wasn't all, as due to that cycle of death, resurrection, and death that he had been enduring for the last few weeks, his skin began to adapt as it became far colder, as his body was adjusting to the constant state of death. And so, for that reason, he gained a slight green hue on his feathers, and his beak turned slightly blue, and his eyes turned blood red. And so, he had become a rather threatening monster. And well, that was precisely what the witch had wanted, as she was soon hoping to use him for many nefarious purposes. However, she would never be able to do that, as just when she was about to cast the final potion upon him so that she could control his mind, a bolt of lightning struck that hut, which then caused the witch to be temporarily paralyzed, and for the cage of that giant turkey to be opened. And so, seeing his opportunity, that turkey ran out of that cage and attacked and ate that witch, consuming her life force. Now, that turkey did appreciate all these changes that he had gone through, as it made him effectively a demigod. However, he didn't like how the witch had achieved that, hence why he ate her. But that being said though, the witch was not the being that he hated the most. No, as he despised the villagers, as if it weren't for them abandoning him and all those other turkeys in that blizzard, he never would have had to see all of his family and friends die at the hand of that blizzard. And without the villagers, he never would have had to undergo that witch's evil and painful rituals. And so, if it wasn't for the villagers, he could have been free, and he could have lived a much better life. And so, for that reason, he saw red, and he wanted revenge upon them. Or, at least, to try and learn why they did what they did. And so, for that reason, he marched out of that hut, and then he spent the next few days of his life flying across the world, looking out for a village. And it was only a few days later that he finally found one. Okay, this was it. All he had to do now was just communicate with the villagers to find out why they abandoned him. And hopefully, he planned they could work this out, or rather civilly, as maybe them abandoning him was all just a miscommunication. However, as he walked through the streets of that village, he could smell a very familiar scent. It was something that he knew he had smelt before, but he just couldn't quite remember what it was. And so he just continued to trot through that village when he saw it, as he looked through one of the windows within that village to see something just horrifying. It was the villagers. They were eating turkey. Oh no, this was wrong, all wrong, as that was just pure evil, as no one should be devouring his species. And so, the idea of civility suddenly evaporated from his mind, as he now set his sights on cold-blooded revenge. And so, he broke into the house and attacked the villagers, as he was just so outraged with what they had done. Now, the villagers were just in complete shock to see such an impressive beast, so much so that they were too stunned to fight back. And so, for that reason, the turkey was able to kill them all and devour their life forces. Now, this made quite a lot of sound, and so for that reason, all the other villagers ran out of their houses to go and see what all this commotion was. And well, they too were shocked to see that monster. But, unlike those first villagers, they began to fight back, and they even ordered the Iron Golem to attack and kill that monster. However, all of their attacks would fail, as that turkey was able to devour the life forms of every single villager. And then he flew away, as he was now set on a mission to free all turkeys within the world from the hands of those evil villagers. And so, to do that, he was prepared to kill every single villager on the surface of the world. Now, as that giant monster ran across the world, terrorizing hundreds of villages, news of his arrival upon the world began to spread. Now, to begin with, many villagers doubted his existence, as how could there be such an impressive beast on the overworld, and why was it spending the time attacking them, especially as it was in the Christmas season? However, over time, as that giant zombie-like turkey consumed thousands of villages, the message of his arrival soon became truth by all. And so, for that reason, they decided to give him a name. However, to begin with, they weren't entirely sure on what to call him, as some called him the Poultrygeist, others the Feather Fiend, or the Turkledon, or the turkey that failed to subscribe, so it became cursed for life. But ultimately, the name given to that beast was the Undead Turkey, and all the villagers feared him, as he ravaged thousands of innocent villages, killing millions of villagers. Many started to pray, hoping that their lives would be spared by that monster. But that would never work, as nothing was going to stop him, or so the villagers thought, as after a while, some villagers made a decision to release all their turkeys, thinking that if the undead turkey saw them doing this, their lives could be spared. And well, when the undead turkey saw this happening, he actually spared them, as really all he wanted was complete freedom and justice for all turkeys. And so, when news of that broke out, all the villagers began to release their turkeys into the wild, thinking that their lives would be spared as well. And well, they were. And so, because of that, the rampage of the undead turkey was over. It was that simple. As the undead turkey just loved to see all those magnificent birds wandering across the great plains of the Minecraft world, living a life of complete freedom away from the greedy hands of those evil villagers. And so, life was good, as all the villagers were safe, all the turkeys were free, and the undead turkey was ecstatic to see his mission achieved. However, after a few months, something very strange began to occur, as many turkeys just began to die, and this was all happening at quite an alarming rate. And so, if something wasn't done soon, they were going to become extinct. And so, the undead turkey, seeing that, used some of his mind powers and was able to summon millions of seeds for the turkeys to eat. And well, that worked. Sort of. As the turkeys stopped dying for a little while. But very quickly, they returned to death. Now, this confused the undead turkey, as why were they suffering more? Because they were free now, so really, this shouldn't be happening. And so he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he thought about it, when he realized something. Those villagers weren't evil when they were farming the turkeys, because they were feeding them, and they were keeping them, generally speaking, in rather good conditions, and they made sure they all lived long and happy lives, and they only killed them once they had aged rather maturely. So, really, the villagers were their saviors, as even though they ate them, at the end of the day, they let millions of turkeys live lives of lesser suffering. So really, he was the evil one, as he had forced all the villagers to release the turkeys, leading them to a life of slow, painful starvation, as they all began to die out there in the wild, as they just couldn't cope with such an environment. And so, all of their suffering was his fault. But still, he believed that he could reverse all of this and could save the turkeys, as all he had to do was just convince the villagers to take the turkeys back and farm them once again, allowing them to live those happy lives. And so, he began to use his mind powers to create feasts of the cooked turkeys in the center of all villages. And well, the villagers accepted those feasts, and they all loved the food, as turkey was their favorite meat. And so, seeing that the undead turkey was doing all this, many villagers began to try and take the turkeys back so that they could continue farming them, just as the undead turkey was wanting them to do. Yes, this was it. He had saved the species. However, he had acted far too late, as by then, all turkeys were dead, and the species was now extinct. So, the undead turkey had failed, and worse than that, he had caused just so much suffering for billions of innocent turkeys, and had led them all to death. He was the evil one. But just as he began to lose hope, believing that he was just nothing more than a complete failure, he somehow laid an egg. And just a few seconds later, that egg was struck by this beam of blue light. And then it began to shake and shake and shake, and then it began to glow as the egg just hatched. But what came out was not a turkey. Rather, it was a whole new species of bird. And this new bird had white feathers and yellow feet and small black eyes. It was the chicken. And so, seeing this new bird, the undead turkey gave himself a new goal. A goal to make sure that this chicken was the most populated bird on the surface of the overworld, ensuring that they would live a better life than that of the now extinct turkeys. And so he had quite a lot of work to do, as he had to convince all the villagers to love the taste of that chicken so that they would start to farm them. And so he began to summon giant feasts of cooked chickens in the homes of every village, along with stacks of eggs for them to hatch and nurture. And that plan worked, as over the next few years, all the villagers understood the message, and with the fear of the undead turkey instilled within them, they began to farm the chickens, giving them very good lives as they fed them and kept them warm and made sure that they were happy, and they only ate them right when they were about to die. And so, with the helping hand of the villagers, along with the oversight of the undead turkey, the chickens slowly grew to become one of the most common creatures on the surface of the overworld, far surpassing the previous records of the turkeys. And so, all was going very well in the overworld, as every year the villagers made sure to eat chicken on Christmas Day as a celebration of that amazing bird. And millions of chickens, if not billions of them, existed both in captivity of the villagers and out there in the wild outbacks of the Minecraft world, and they were all thriving. And so the work of the Undead Turkey was finally complete, as there was nothing more for him to do. And thus, for that reason, he decided to start exploring the overworld so that he could experience all of its natural beauty. And well, that's precisely what he did for the next 100,000 years, as he climbed the tallest mountains, swam in the warmest waters, and flew over the greatest forests. It was just amazing, and the undead turkey was mesmerized with so much of what he saw. And he did that all without issue. Until one day, when he was just traveling through a snowy tundra, that he was spotted by a Steve. Now, he had never seen one of those before, and so he flew over to it so that he could investigate it. However, as soon as he began to do that, the Steve began to shoot at him. Oh no, that wasn't right. He didn't want to be shot at, and so he began to fly away from that hostile being. However, as he flew away, the Steve chased him, continuing to shoot him down with these flamed arrows. Now, this was starting to do quite some damage to him, and no matter how far away he was going from that Steve, he was still being shot, and he was taking some serious damage. And so, for that reason, the undead turkey was forced to turn around and start fighting back, or else he was going to die. But when he went in to take a bite of that entity, the Steve survived. The undead turkey was shocked, as no being had ever survived any of his attacks. And so, that meant that this being was powerful, very powerful, and could likely kill him. And so, he began to fly away as fast as possible. But that player just continued to chase him, shooting more arrows at him. And so, that left the undead turkey with only one choice. That was to hide underground. And so, when he saw a giant cave opening, he dove into it. But the Steve followed along, and so he was forced to head deeper and deeper into that cave. But the Steve was still shooting at him, and so he was about to die. But then he reached the bedrock layers of the world, and he saw an escape, as there was a hole in the bedrock. Yes, this was it. He could get away. And so he dove into that opening and began to fly away just above the deadly depths of the void. And with that, the Steve was no longer able to chase him. However, the Steve stopped caring about the undead turkey when he arrived at the bedrock layers of the world. As this hole in the bedrock, well, it was giant, and it clearly wasn't natural, as it was just so jagged and ruthless. And so, a living being must have done this, and he began to focus his attention on finding the creature that did this. And well, what he would find down there in that cave would change his life forever. But to learn about the horrifying sight that he uncovered, you'll need to watch this video.